Good evening. My name is Tracy Metz, and this is Stadsleven. This time in collaboration with TQ, our happy partner. Cities love startups. They bring in new ideas, new talent, new money. Startups are a form of romantic entrepreneurship harking back to the days of the pizza boxes in the garage. Remember that? Although I must say the sleek design of the office of TQ is a far cry from the garage and the pizza boxes. Everyone is hoping to become the next AirBNB or the next Uber, or to stay closer to home, the next Booking, the next IGN, or the next Elastic. But we know that half of them will disappear within a year, and only 1 in 10 will ultimately be successful. The most extreme example, of course, that we've seen recently was WeWork. Crash and burn. Went from 47 billion valuation to 8 billion in a few days. The flamboyant founder, however, managed to exit with 1.7 billion, but his thousands of employees were left wondering whether they would have a job. And leaving the world wondering also, is this just some crazy one-off, or is the story of WeWork's a real warning? It was certainly, to my mind, a much-needed reality check. In Europe, the investment in startups is going through the roof. This week, Atomico's report on the state of European tech appeared and said it expects the investment to hit 35 billion this year. In Europe, okay. In the US, that's 132 billion, but that's the US. Is that a good thing? If I were an investor, I'm not sure I'd be putting millions or hundreds of millions into a sector with a 90% chance of failure. Would you? So obviously, I'm not the one who's going to be rich at the end of the evening. I guess I just don't get it. Maybe Johan van Mil, our investor this evening, can explain what it is that I don't get. But I do wonder, is this startup model future-proof? In the web magazine of Stadsleven, you can read a piece that I wrote based on an article in The Atlantic that said, at least in the US, millennials are sort of disenchanted about the startup scene. They figure that a job in a corporation is a better way to get up to climb the professional ladder. Startups are just too much risk, and also, given the recent financial crisis, startups don't have enough startup capital in their bank account or in their family or friend's bank account to get going. The number of under 30s starting their own business in the US is the lowest in 25 years. So where are the next startups coming from? Not to mention the lack of women in tech. 46% of women who work in the tech world have said that they have experienced discrimination, and 93% of all investment goes to startups that have an all-male founder team. Prince Constantijn was on the TV recently in the BNN-VARA program. Makes all the difference. Doet er niet toe. Hoe heet het ook alweer? It's a man's world. Thank you. It's a man's world. He was on the TV program and he gave these statistics about the investment in the startup world and how abysmal the position of women is in that world, and we will definitely be talking about that this evening. We will also be talking about startups in the Netherlands. On the one hand, we're doing very well. On the other hand, the Netherlands are, as we all know, very risk averse. Moreover, there is a big stigma attached to bankruptcy, which is very different from the US. In the US, if you haven't gone bankrupt 3 times, you haven't really done your best, and it's like a Purple Heart, a combat ribbon that you get. And actually, the seed for this evening was born when I was at an event recently in the home of the mayor of Amsterdam, which was organized by Startup Amsterdam. The director, Bas Beekman, is also with us this evening for international startups in the Netherlands. And Constantijn held a talk there saying that, yes, we pour a tremendous amount of time, effort, and money into our startup culture, and that's a very good thing with tremendous results, but at the same time, is the Dutch culture open enough to let all these great ideas really percolate down into society? Not so much. So I'll be asking him about that in a moment. And I want to leave you, before we get started with our program for this evening, which is ram-packed full of interesting people and great ideas, lots of great ideas this evening. I wanted to leave you with a really great definition of failure, which I took from Boris Veldhuizen van Santen, one of the co-founders of the Next Web and therefore also of TQ. And he spoke the famous words, "Failure? I have successfully proven that this is not a good idea." Hey. Prince Constantijn, may I invite you to the stage, please?
Evening.
Good evening. Welcome. Do you remember this event at the mayor's house that I mentioned? Do you remember your talk there?
Well, there were many events at the mayor's house, which is actually a testimony to the great engagement of Amsterdam in getting startups at a much higher level of interest, and the kind of focus that Amsterdam has given to tech in recent years. Mm-hmm.
You're just back from the tech meeting Slush in Helsinki, where the Swedish investor Atomico presented the report that I just mentioned, the State of European Tech. But you were also on the Fortune Global Forum recently, and you said that the most important high-tech companies are still in the US and China, and you said we sort of missed the boat. So, given those two polls, how would you say the Netherlands are doing?
I think you are taking some huge steps through history. What I was saying is that this was a question about also about innovation capabilities of Europe, and that in the 90s we were so happy with the GSM standard, and that we thought that the telcos were IT companies and that they were tech companies, but they actually stalled innovation because we missed out on the whole internet development and the platform development and the mobile internet, and then basically a lot of the innovation that came after that, we weren't, as Europe, were not actively engaged in that because our tech scene was SAP, so we had software and we had very dominant telcos, and so that was my comment at the time. So I don't think we are currently missing the boat. I do think, where you see that tech has now become strategic. It's now become highest political priority. AI, and the whole competition about AI in the next generation is quantum computing. All that has become top level strategic interest, and it wasn't like that in the past. So I think we all woke up. And now the question is, how are we going to participate in that development? Is Europe going to jump ahead in any of those areas? And there's a big challenge because China has the data. China has long-term strategic planning. The US have the large tech platforms, and they also accrue a lot of data, and they have a lot of capital at their disposal to develop a lot of new IP. And Europe is somewhere in the middle. We don't have the data. We have GDPR, which we're very proud of, that we are norm setters in the world, but it doesn't really bring us a lot of business opportunity. And on the other hand, we want to retain this kind of very nice balance between welfare state and competitive, innovative economies, like we have basically Scandinavia, Netherlands, maybe Switzerland. A few of those countries are trying to manage this balance. But we also know that developments are going so fast that it's going to be very hard to retain that if we don't invest deeply into these new developments. And Mr. Macron, I think, is one of the few leaders in Europe that's really understood that, and he's been very vocal on this point.
Speaking of investment, when Startup Delta started, that was with an investment from the government of 10 million.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, first, when Nelly started, there was hardly any money. It was 400,000 euros. Then we had 700,000 euros for the second 1.5 years, and then we went up to 1 million. So we kind of slowly ended with 1.5 million of the government for 1.5 years. So in total, the government spend was only 4.5 million for 4 years of Startup Delta. So it was not a big investment. But now, huge yields, of course, huge returns, but.
But now, 65 million from government.
Yeah, that's again, so
What are you going to do with all that money?
Well, it's 35 for TechLeap for 4 years. So it's just to put it in perspective. And there is another 30 million that can be spent on other startup-related initiatives in the ecosystem, and that's mostly under control of the Ministry of Economic Affairs. So it's maybe it's a bit like a startup world. You have to kind of blow things up a bit. So it looks 65 looks very big. If you break it down, it's about 8.5 million a year.
Okay.
Which is a very nice amount of money. And what's actually much more important...
But what are you going to do with it?
We actually, the most important thing is we now have a mandate. And and so the startup or entrepreneurship, scale up, whatever you call it, is now a much more integrated part of policy development in The Hague. We sit at the tables and we have actually money to do things. So in the past, because we didn't have any money and we were 50% financed by the private sector, we always were looking for other people to fund the things that we want to do. And now we actually we have our own budget. We can actually take initiatives. We can procure studies. We can, if we see there's a problem, we can procure a study. We can bring people together. We can organize events. So it can really change things.
But in France, for example, the government invests directly in startups, but in the Netherlands, no. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. The government does subsidize startups, and we have these regional development funds. They do invest directly in startups, and they're fully government funded. So the government does invest directly. I personally am not a big fan of that. I think subsidies can be good in tech, very tech-heavy, IP-heavy startups, because you are actually funding the whole development still, which is more like a research project before it becomes anywhere close to commercialization. And there the government does play a very useful role. But I think government money can be much better spent in growing a viable and sustainable venture capital industry that funds basically from the early stage to late stage, and that is and you also have much more leverage. I mean, we've seen that in Singapore, we've seen in Israel and other places where the government basically puts in Singapore it's very generous. So they put $5 for every dollar that a foreign VC fund invests in Singapore, which means that a lot of funds have come to Singapore and operate now from there. And now the government basically pulls out. It was a good investment. They made a lot of returns, so it was financially very interesting. But also it managed to attract a lot of the big venture capitalists from Silicon Valley, and now they are established in Singapore, and it means the capital stays. And I think it's a much more smarter way to leverage your public euro than to try to invest directly into companies, because it's very hard to compete with well-established professional venture capitalists, and why should you as a government?
The Netherlands seems to play the role of incubator, though. They start here, they grow here, they're stimulated, we have a good ecosystem and getting better thanks to TechLeap, and then they go abroad. Then they go to Silicon Valley, for example. Aren't we losing isn't that a form of brain drain that we would like to stop?
No, I'd like to accelerate that if possible. I think, and they're not leaving. Adyen is still here, Booking is still here, Elastic is still here. But yeah, they grow a big business. But it's a super competitive market. If you make it in the US, and and there's a lot of talent there, obviously, then and you can grow there, then go ahead. I think it's a very stupid thing you can do. And we're seeing it at local level, we're seeing it at provincial level, we're seeing it at national level, and even at a kind of European level, this idea that if a company wants to go to other places, that we want to kind of retain them. And I think if the company needs this, if there is a better business environment somewhere else, that either we get our act together and then they'll stay here, but if the talent is there, the capital is there, or maybe the regulation allows them to do stuff in another place, then they should go. I mean, like there was I think 2 weeks ago, there was this startup, and they developed a kind of a square potato, and it was because if you
that sounds like something we really need.
No, it is really necessary, because you 40% of a potato is lost when you make French fries. So if you make it square, then you have very little loss of the potato. So it's more environmentally.
We need that.
So you need that, but it involved genetic modification, and in Europe that's really difficult. So he goes to Canada, develops it there, the business leaves. Then I think, well, that's actually an interesting discussion we need to have about how much do we or can we kind of ex ante control these kind of developments, and do we accept that we stop innovation happening on our continent? And this with the genetically modified organism, that has been very, very pertinent. And you see that development continued everywhere in the world. Europe didn't do it, and we're now kind of lagging behind. And a lot of very good scientists and people working on these things and business that grow, for instance, out of Wageningen, cannot sustain to be here because the time to market is much too long, and there's much uncertainty of the regulatory process.
Mm-hmm. And the regulatory process is something that you can only perhaps influence indirectly, but not directly, even through TechLeap.
No, we're not a lobby organization. We'll lobby when we think it's necessary, when we think it's feasible to actually deliver change. But for us to, for instance, lobby for the digital internal market in Brussels is just way too far, and not the best use of our resources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Speaking of investments, you have spoken out in favor of getting pension funds to invest, to be more eager to invest in startups. But pension funds, aren't they by definition the most risk-averse funds that we have?
Probably. But then you have investment portfolios, you have the risky side, and you have the very riskless side. Now, on the riskless side, there's not much you can earn anyway because the interest rates are just gone.
You better put it in the bank.
So, well, the bank also is not going to give you much either. So, but it's in reality for the big pension funds, the venture capital is too small. And they, even if you would have a 40% return, they don't really care, because if you have 200 billion or 400 billion under management, then if you invest 500 million in venture capital, then any kind of return is not really going to make a difference. So things have happened. APG obviously has initiated INCEF, and INCEF is a really relevant player in the Dutch startup ecosystem, and MN has done 100 plus recently in innovation industries. So things are moving, and I talked to quite a number of pension funds, and even the smaller ones. They want to do something. They want to be involved in tech in some way, but they feel restrained by the supervisor, so by the regulator. They feel indeed there's a high reputational risk, because you might invest through a venture capital fund in a startup and it fails, or there's some kind of issue with the founder, or
9 out of 10, huh?
Yeah, or the venture capital firm or the intermediary gets a double fee, and that is then publicized in the media, and they said, look, our pension money is going to make rich people richer. So those kind of risks.
Or it's going down the drain for a startup that fails.
Yeah, but you don't invest. That's why they shouldn't invest in startups. They should invest in people like Patrick, and make sure that money is spent for growing that whole category of businesses. And yes, of course, if you as you mentioned before, 1 in 10 is successful. I think that's an old statistic. I think there's many of the kind of venture builders or new venture capital firms are doing a lot to move the needle and make it 3 or 4 or 5 out of 10, because a lot you can do in support of startups. It's not just putting in your money and then leaning back and see what the founder is going to do. No, it's helping them in the next round of funding. It's helping them to find the right executive staff. It's opening networks to them. So it's a much more active business than, for instance, private equity. So and I think in the Netherlands we have a very strong private equity tradition, but it doesn't translate. Private equity doesn't translate to venture. But I think, well,
One of our speakers,
Patrick Vermeil, can talk about that.
Johan van Mil, in the panel
Johan
at the end of the evening, says that an important part of their work is advising the startups that they help support. You also have mentioned that you thought it would be a good idea to change the taxation of shares, that you wouldn't be wouldn't be taxed on your shares in a startup until it started to be lucrative.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It seems to me just obvious.
To being taxed on something that
isn't worth anything.
That is not worth, or that is paper worth. And if you don't have any cash to pay your taxes, then what should you borrow to pay your taxes? That makes no sense. So
what do the tax people say about this?
Well, conceptually they understand it, but it's we have box 1, 2, 3, and it's all kind of has to fit in these things, and it gets very complicated. And the we read about this more regularly than we want to, but our fiscal agency is not the Belastingdienst is not at this time not the best IT company organization in the world, and
everybody seems to know what you mean.
Well, it gets very complicated for them, so they don't really want to change, but they understand conceptually that this is right, and we want a bit more. We don't want only to defer taxes till these options or shares are liquid. We also want then a tax rate which is not 53%, but is a more is more akin to your capital gains. Mm-hmm. But that's a longer discussion but the fairness argument is now acknowledged. They're working on it, and we hope that by this summer we'll have at least some conclusion on this matter. And it's taken 4 years, so super fast.
Relatively speaking, yes. Let me just finish by putting one remark to you that you made also in that same Fortune Global panel.
Wow, were you there?
No, I wasn't, but it was really interesting. It's the only YouTube video of half an hour that I've really watched till the end. Partly because I wanted to hear what you had to say. And one of the things you said was, we're behind in the risk appetite of our investors and in the ambition of our entrepreneurs. And to tell you the truth, I was so surprised that you said that, because it doesn't seem to be what you normally are promoting with TechLeap.
Well, yeah, actually, this is it's kind of an old phenomenon. I think if you ask the startup founders, they'll tell you that the VC is risk averse and that everybody's kind of moving up and away from the early stage and all that. So that's what you hear. And then you talk to the investor and they say, but the founders just don't have good propositions, and they're not ambitious enough. And so it's
always somebody else's fault.
Well, I think it's both true, probably, and we don't teach, in school or in our families, we teach people to stay normal, feet on the ground and all that. So if you have a big idea, people just lean back and look till you fail, and then they say, haha, I told you so. We love the program, where people go with an ambition to go to southern, I don't know, where they maybe go to Africa or they go to Spain, or, what's it called?
Verder weg, wij gaan weg?
Yeah, something like that. What's it called?
Ik
vertrek. Yeah,
we
love that, and we love that because we see these people.
We see the failure
these people
coming.
on and say, yeah, you see the failure coming. But you say, well, you could also say, what amazing people that they just follow their dream and do this, and cheer them on. No, we just go and look, and then we look at them and say, you see, we saw that coming, and they don't even speak the language. And we're so happy that they actually
fail.
That they actually fail. We're so.
So what you're saying is that the Netherlands thinks too small.
Well, we don't help each other to think bigger, let's say. So I think we all have to tell that story, that the ambition should be and could be much higher, and it doesn't really matter for what you're aiming. Everything is achievable. I mean, Mr. Musk is putting rockets in space and he's landing them back on Earth. That's kind of impossible. And the people at NASA said that's impossible. But there was someone there who said, this guy has done weird stuff before, so let's go with him for a while. And he did it. So, and he's just an ordinary human being. There are many ordinary human beings doing just totally exceptional things. Why? Because they believe they can. Why? Because they have people around them also that try to cheer them on. And one exceptional person, I want to mention him here because there's just been a lot of negative things around him. Is my cousin. He's also an entrepreneur, a great entrepreneur. He built his business as a student, and he sold it, and he built another business, and he sold it, and he bought it back for nothing, and he built it up again, and sold it again, and built it up. You know, he's been amazing, and every time he kind of invested in real estate, but he didn't only invest in real estate, he also invests in office buildings, which he then renovates and makes them and changes them from an office function into apartments. So actually, he's added a lot of square meterage to the city. So if you just write that up, yeah, okay. So he's not just a house.
Press in the house.
Okay. So and he buys it's a group, but he buys the Formula One or the circuit here in Zandvoort. So and I asked him, why. So he has the circuit and he likes race driving. He's like has the best time of his life. He has a good business. He has about 600 people working for him, and business doing great, and has a good life. So why do you go after the Formula One? Why would you do that? It's masochistic because you then have to deal with governments and all of this kind of stuff and the media and all that. And then he said, because they sat around the table and said, we got a circuit now. What if you have a circuit? What do? You have to have the ambition to get to Formula One. They said, is that possible? And then people said, no, that's nearly impossible. And that's the entrepreneur. He said, nearly. And within 1.5 years, they managed to get to Formula One. And that, I think, is an excellent entrepreneur who doesn't think small.
Mm-hmm. So to cite Obama, yes, we can. We can think bigger.
Absolutely. And a lot of it is big risk taking, because also with the circuit and the people that went along in these businesses, they will go broke if this is not happening. The people that support this, so they are all taking this immense risk. Why? Because they believe in it. They want to make it happen, and they're proud that this can happen in the Netherlands. And that is, that's the kind of big thinking and risk taking that we sometimes need to make things happen.
And by comparison, I'm sure you're proud of our startup culture here.
Yeah, no, I think we're doing we're doing really well. And if you've seen what happened in the last 4 years in Amsterdam, it's absolutely amazing. And I hope, Bas will get the time to talk about that. But really, when we started with Startup Delta, I remember a little office here on the marineterrein, what we would call the Tech Wharf, which was then subsequently, that name was we were never allowed to use that. We thought it was pretty cool because it was Dutch, and it was a wharf. It's VOC, Tech Wharf, but it was not possible. It was too political, and because the marineterrein was, everybody had a claim on it. So I think Burgemeester van Laan said, let's leave that alone and not brand it too much. I still think that we should brand it Tech Wharf, and we still should make it a real hub for city urban innovations, smart city development.
I think we're actually working on that.
Let's do that.
Good.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Prins Constantijn. Oh, excuus. Ik donderde van de trap af. Goodness. I'm sure that looked great on the live stream. May I invite to the floor Michel Visser and Stefano Cutello. Hi guys.
Hello.
You two and the two other storytellers this evening are sort of the core of our evening, because you are the entrepreneurs who are here to tell about how it all went.
We failed.
Well, failure and near failure,
And
the hockey stick of going down and sometimes coming back up and sometimes not. Michel, you started a startup a couple of years ago called Connected. Could you tell us first what the idea was?
The idea was pretty simple. So before I started my startup, I was an actor. I finished my studies in 2007 at the drama school in Arnhem, and then while rehearsing on a play, I went back home I sat in a tram behind people and I was secretly over listening their story, and I found out they just had a job application. They were rejected due to a bad presentation, and I thought these guys should have learned something from me about presenting, and I had the skills to do that. So I literally thought like, okay, all the skills you need to develop yourself, they reside in the people around you. So why not build a platform which help you find the skills you need to develop yourself?
Literally in your neighborhood, or how
Yeah.
close around you in your neighborhood?
So we started with a kilometer around you, and we asked people if you got that skill, and then we connected people, thousands of them, and they started learning together.
And what was your business model? Did you do this for free as philanthropy, or?
Yeah, we started off for free. That was part of the problem as well. So we really focused on like hobby skills in the start, which went awesome. People wanted to learn to play piano, language skills, all different. The ukulele was very popular in the first year. So these kind of skills, we kind of like free skill sharing, and that happens a lot. But yeah, we focus on growing our audience and our members a lot, but yeah, we didn't find a business model by then because people were not willing to pay for that free skill sharing.
So you were very enthusiastic about the idea, but others less so if they had to pay for it? Because you started a subscription base also.
Yeah, so later on, eventually, yeah, you start realizing, like, it was also kind of like a hype by then. It's like, okay, if you really go quick and you grow your audience, you show transactions, I started to realize I'm focusing on the wrong incentive.
What should you have been focusing on?
Instead of like big and really quick and getting a lot of members on our platform, I think I should have found like, okay, what is the real problem we can solve for real people? Like, okay, what is one transaction where one person is really willing to pay money for and give a transaction fee to us? So I should have maybe started a lot smaller and really like focus, okay, what is that one problem we can solve where some person is willing to pay a little bit of money for?
Stefano, you worked as a technical lead at eBay in Italy. You had your own company on the side. And then there was this moment that you told me about and that I wrote up in the interview with you that I did in the web magazine for Stadsleven. You were sitting with your dad on the couch, looking at his old photo albums. And then the light went on above your head. What was the thought?
So then I thought, will I ever be able to provide that same experience to my children? And I thought I was, and I still heavily using Facebook or Instagram, and then I thought where all these memories will go. So as a product guy and a software engineer, I actually built a tool myself just to fix my own problem without actually thinking about opening a startup. I didn't even know what was a startup. I just really wanted to build a tool that would have got all the stuff that I posted on Facebook and then turn it into something tangible, actually a book.
A photo album, a photo book.
Yeah, and that's how everything started. So I asked a bunch of friends to try it out to see if it was actually working. And at that time, I used a very tiny trick that everybody that was logging in with their Facebook account to create their book, I was actually spamming their Facebook wall saying, I just tried Passbook, super cool, you should try it as well.
GDPR.
Yeah, that was not existing at that time. So that's how back in Italy and still as a project for night and weekend, how everything went completely viral. And that was the moment where I say, okay, that's probably this can be my next train, my next venture. So that's how everything started.
And then you told me that you actually wanted to go to the US. And that you decided to leave Italy because things weren't moving fast enough, and you wanted to go to an accelerator somewhere in the world, and you went to Rockstart, thinking that that would lead you to Silicon Valley. Yeah, but you're still here. What happened?
Yeah, so like back at the time, we had a lot of momentum, and then we started getting some inbound interest from VC, and I didn't know anything about fundraising or talking about VC. But back in Italy, stuff were not, let's say, moving fast enough. So I say, okay, I want to get into an environment where I can get not only money or cash, but actually the experience I was missing. So I literally started to apply to everywhere in the world. I really didn't care where to go. But I have like US in mind as the main market, and that's for Passbook now is still the main market. So Rockstart actually chose me in the first batch of the program, the accelerator program, and that's why in 2012 I moved here. And
You had just bought a house in Italy.
also, yes, yeah. My girlfriend wasn't that happy at that time. Yeah. So, but yeah, like when I had to decide if quitting my job in eBay and trying to sell again the house that I bought just 6 months before, it wasn't a rational choice for sure. So
You were stressed even before you had a startup.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Back to you, Michel. When did you figure out that things were not going as you hoped?
So once we really started, so we stopped everything at one point. So we were focusing on building an app, and I was like, okay, we're not gonna. We stop any development. We go out and we really start questioning people, and then we started to kind of like see kind of like the first hints of a business model, and then we started developing, but it went really slow, and the iterations went not quick enough to actually learn from it. And then my co-founder said he needed a new challenge. He started to leave. One of the first employees said needed a new. So I thought, like, okay, this is not a good sign. And we need to rebirth quicker and make iterations quicker, learn quicker. And that was the first sign of, okay, this is not. So we're not getting there. We're not learning quick enough.
Sleepless nights?
Maybe. And then you start to see the end of your runway as well, and eventually we didn't manage to secure funds and get the business model right in time to actually prove that we're having a strong model.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, you had to fold, and you were left holding the debts.
Not completely like that, fortunately. But yeah, then at one point, it was at the end. Then we were having talks with an investor, and when everything was almost ready, and all the papers were checked by the notary. It fell through, and then you need to let people go, and you're alone in your office, and then you're like, what's next? And then you start fighting, looking for new opportunities.
You told me how it fell through. I hope I'm not saying anything I shouldn't hear, but you told me how it fell through. Mm-hmm. You were sitting at the notary's office waiting for the investor to show up and sign.
Yes.
And he didn't show up.
He didn't show up, no.
What a jerk.
So literally a week earlier, we went through all the different documents in the Hoxton Hotel in Amsterdam, and we ticked off every page. So the next week it should have been signed, but then it didn't. And then when you're close to the end of your runway and you've went all that through all that talks with different investors, closing down your funnel, going in depth and with the talks, meeting the family of the investor as well. Then you're a little bit too far down the line.
Did you sue him? This is the American reaction, of course.
So what would that bring me? That's what was. So what?
Well, it might bring you the money back that you lost.
No. That wouldn't happen. So the thing is, like, I could focus on the negatives. So finding out what made him not come, and but eventually, when that's done, you need to focus on what are the next steps I can. So first, you need to help people work for you as well. So if you need to let people go, you need to help people to find another job as well. That was one of the first things which got on my mind, and then focusing on tracing him to sign a contract. I didn't want him to sign any contract anymore. I didn't want his money anymore. So then that wouldn't bring me to a next step as well.
Yeah. Are you out of debt now?
Oh yeah.
Good. Are you? This is a much more personal question. Has it been difficult for you going from being a founder of your own company to being an employee of Nextdoor?
By times, yeah. So Right now, I kind of like, I'm the country lead for the Netherlands for Nextdoor, which is a US-based company in San Francisco. So the good thing about this is you have a lot of freedom because you're here in Amsterdam running a company and for them here, so you can do a lot of your own ideas. But on the other hand, you follow the metrics and the course they decide you to go on, but within that trajectory, you can be very creative, and then that's where my entrepreneurship comes in handy.
Stefano, you've been on this roller coaster ride up and down several times. You told me that you've gone bankrupt almost 3 times in the course of running Passbook.
At least 3 times, yeah.
At
almost.
least.
Yeah.
So
but never happened.
It never happened. No, and you're still here. But you told me during our talk something that I really thought was the epitome of startup life. You said, when I had just a couple €100 in the bank for the next couple months, I was having sleepless nights, which everyone will understand. And now I have over 10 million in revenue, and I still have sleepless nights.
Yeah. Let's say
Closer to the mic.
It just change the game, not the rules. So it's the type of challenge are different. Like before was about selling the first book, and I remember that we were like really celebrating every time that we were getting a Slack notification. There was like a sale, an order. But afterward, that problem turned into say, okay, now we have too many orders. How can we process them? And it was now you have like customer complain that they're getting their book late, or like so that's or you need more people. So people was always one of the most challenged at any stage of this roller coaster. So hiring and keeping them on board. So that's for sure.
There's always something, either a legal issue or a people issue or an order issue. You told me once that. Oh, good heavens! Thank you.
Something can always
Spontaneous
happen,
combustion.
Right? Yeah.
The tension is too much. I wanted to put to you a quote from one of the famous Dutch unicorns, Elastic, which is a maker of open source software. And the founder, Steven Schuurman, said that his company is valued now at almost $1 billion. And he said in an interview, it's high time we started making money. And I think, what is it about this strange world of the startups that you can be rolling in revenue and still not making any money? Are you making any money yet?
Yeah, this year we are profitable, actually.
Hey,
Yeah.
You said that this year would have to be the time that you would start to make some money.
Yeah. Learn it the hard way, because when I started, I had this big dream, and it was actually too much of a dream. So I worked only saying, like, I don't care about revenue. I really want to build this new Facebook about memories for the past. So I really want to go big, big, big. And I ended up, let's say, not caring about the traction, but really building an extra feature and finding myself the excuse about, we are not, things are not working because we miss that other feature, or we miss that other feature. So we build it up like this Christmas tree of a lot of feature that nobody was using. One of the many times where we were almost close to bankrupt, then I started focusing on just one KPI that was, with the dollar sign, and I started getting rid of feature or focusing on the go-to-market or selling, and it was not about the product anymore, but was about finding the right people that and the product market fit to really start validating what we were doing. That was 4 years later after I started already, so that.
The story, the line that I seem to see coming back in all the founder stories is that the most dangerous thing is your own enthusiasm. You think, I think this is a great idea. Everybody else must think so too. And if you don't test that idea sufficiently, it can really bring you down. On the other hand, if you don't believe in your idea, who will? So where's the, Michel, where's the fine line between these two?
Oh, yeah, I think you need to take that energy you have as a founder and the enthusiasm you have. You need to just bring it in the audience as soon as possible, and then start talking with people, drinking a lot of coffee, and then really making sure that you have a mirror for yourself, and also finding a lot of people who can advise you about it around you, like critical minds
People you
around you.
don't know,
People
because
you
the
don't
people
know,
you
but-
know will be more likely to be enthusiastic just like you.
No, and just really honest, straightforward friends can be really useful as well.
We just say, Michel, don't go there.
Yeah.
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 Stefano?
And sometimes that enthusiasm is also, the only thing that keep you going. When you have nothing else, and that's you just need to rely on yourself. But like that can turn also something that like one of our shareholders told me is also only the paranoid survive. That's a quote of like Intel.
Only the paranoid survive?
Yeah.
Paranoid? Why paranoid?
Because you live in this constant anxiety of stuff can always go wrong. So the moment that you believe that something start to work, you always are prepared for the worst to happen. And that's what is the, embracing the struggle and makes you keep going. That's the most important thing.
How many people work at Passbook now?
Around 20.
Around 20?
Yeah.
Okay. And you have your office at WeWork?
Yeah, indeed.
You still have an office?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, but the good part is that like so we are 20 people, we do more than 10 million in revenue. Our main market is the US, UK, Canada, so we are just
70% of your market is US, you
yes,
told me.
indeed.
70%?
Yeah. And we just, like this year, seriously focusing on Europe. So that's why we kind of also flew under the radar here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it's, you're one of the companies that Constantijn was talking about, of staying here and still touching markets far outside the Netherlands.
Exactly. Like we love staying here. We find good talent. We can have a business mainly driven by US growth, but we don't need to be there technically.
Okay. Thank you, Michel Visser, Stefano Cutello,
Thank you.
for your stories. May I invite to the floor the two members of our next group of speakers, Jen Harvey of Google Developers Launchpad and Irene Duin of the new Innovation District Cumulus Park.
I'm pleased I didn't fall over. Step one.
So, thank you for joining us. I wanted to ask the two of you to come on stage to talk about future models of startups after the model that we already have. How can we do it differently, better, more conscientiously, serving the world better with all the energy that's obviously here in the startup world? Well, let's just start with the simple question. What is Google Developers Launchpad, Jen?
Good question.
Well, if you don't know, nobody does.
Well, we've actually simplified our business model this year, and we focus purely on accelerating startups. We run a startup accelerator. It's a 3-month-long program full of mentorships, labs, really a 360 approach to startups. But our unique selling point is the fact that we can tap into a lot of the talent that sits within Google, particularly around AI and ML, because that's where we're seeing a lot of startups focus, particularly in the tech space. They're looking for guidance in the AI space, and we actually have a talent pool that is full of those people, and they really appreciate those connections. So
I gather that one program is focused on talent in emerging countries, 40 different countries.
Yes, we have 2 different types of programs. So we have our accelerator program that we run, but we also have a partner network. Our partner network exists across the globe, helps us reach scale, and we work with local accelerators to help bring our accelerator programming to more markets, where as a small team within Google, we probably wouldn't be able to reach on our own.
How long has the Launchpad existed?
It's been around for 5 years, and it was born out of Tel Aviv, so obviously one of the entrepreneurial hubs of EMEA.
And the studios are especially for AI and machine learning. The focus on emerging countries, is that because Google is seeking to expand its market? Or is it because you're helping to tap new talent that doesn't have access to all these amenities?
I guess it's a bit of both. I would be lying.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
I'd be lying if I said we didn't have an agenda in this, because we do have offices in a lot of these emerging markets where we do want to see more product adoption for Google products. But it's also important for us to help grow these ecosystems, because we're seeing a lot of talent coming from the emerging markets, a lot of tech talent that then is moving elsewhere, moving to Silicon Valley and working for startups there. But how can we help them start their own companies and build more startup ecosystems actually where they live?
I saw on the site that you have 24 partners all over the world, including Pakistan, Nigeria, Oman, the Philippines. Do you travel to all these places also for Launchpad?
I've just come back from Tokyo. So,
I know, that's why.
Not me personally, but our whole team. We travel around. We like to make sure that our partners and our accelerators feel like we are investing as a global team in the local markets, because a lot of people think global means, oh, that's Mountain View, that's the US, that's Silicon Valley. But what global means to me is actually global. I come from just outside of London. I was in the London office for a while, and I know how it feels to be governed by the US. But I think there is so much more we can do to invest in everywhere around the world that isn't the US, and we're actually looking at focusing on Europe now.
And you have just been, you just moved to Silicon Valley a year ago yourself.
I did indeed.
Are you living in your car? Or?
I'm living in a very small apartment. It's probably the same size as my car in the UK. But yes, it's a very expensive city to live in, and that's quite sad that a lot of these tech companies are growing, and it's actually pushing out a lot of locals from San Francisco, where I live, and it's actually changing the city and making it not a particularly attractive place for people to live, but at a high price tag. So I think there's something we need to do in terms of if we're going to start investing a lot in these new tech companies and start, putting our investments in all these startups that may, be IPO, may be the next Google. We need to also invest in the ecosystem around us to make the city feel safe with this growing and emerging sort of
that is
tech ecosystem.
Exactly one of the things that Cumulus Park wants to do, Irene. You're the program manager. You still officially work at ING, but you'll be moving to the foundation that will be running Cumulus Park. And I thought this was interesting to invite you here this evening, because this is a whole new model for me. It's tech innovation combined with urban development. So very locally rooted. In the southeast of Amsterdam, which for a long time has been quite a troubled neighborhood. So tell us what Cumulus Park is and does, or will do, because it's just very new.
We just launched it on the 9th of October, so that's a little over a month ago. So I should be careful what I say, because we haven't proven a lot of the things that we're actually building towards.
We'll ask you back in a year.
Okay, great. Ooh. Okay, adding some pressure. What we are developing is an innovation district in the southeast of Amsterdam, all around collaborative innovation. And what we see, we actually visited a lot of hubs around the Netherlands that are focusing on innovation, and many of them are focusing on startups, which is really good, because I think we need that ecosystem. It's very important. But we see other needs emerging as well. So we see it's not just about corporates and startups and collaborating, but there's also a whole world in the middle. And we also see, as a result of all these new emerging technologies, we're becoming very much interwoven with each other and entangled. That also means that we depend for innovation and for success on each other, meaning that new innovation models are coming to the table, not just, we call them one-to-many, one corporate with a lot of startups or one investor with a lot of startups, but also corporates with corporates, or public and private parties collaborating on new innovations.
Are these all in your physical district in the southeast of Amsterdam?
So the aim is to bring that much more diverse ecosystem together. So not just startups and corporates, but yes, corporates, but also medium-sized enterprises, smaller enterprises, universities, and startups, because they are important in the ecosystem. But I think going forward, and if the focus is on innovation, you need more models and more parties than only those two.
Who are your partners in Cumulus Park?
So there's basically two developments running in parallel. One is the district development, because it is a physical place, and we know from research and from a lot of experience that it is important if you innovate that you look each other in the eyes and that you have a physical place where you can work together. So there is a physical district, and it's right next to Bijlmer Station. It consists of 8 buildings, and it's not just ING buildings, but it's also the Hogeschool van Amsterdam, so the University of Applied Sciences, and the ROC, the Vocational College, who is also in the area. And together we developed that as a collaborative innovation district. However, we're also setting up a foundation, and that foundation is going to be independent, and running these is basically building that infrastructure for innovation. So building the ecosystem, facilitating the programs, and that is working with many more partners.
What's the connection between that ecosystem and the physical place? Is there a fence around it? Will I know? Is there a sign in front? How will I know I'm in Cumulus Park?
That's a very good question. So we're working on the wayfinding, but that's probably not what you meant. It's interesting to go back to how this started. It started actually 5 years ago when ING was just interested in building a new head office and building a campus, and that was also the word that was being used. However, one of the characteristics of a campus is usually that it's owned by one party, either a big corporate or a university, and it's fenced off. One of the things we learned when we said, hey, if it's really about building a cross-industry ecosystem that can advance innovation and is not related to fintech or banking only, that means opening up. That means being accessible to a lot of other parties. Then that conflicts with the whole principle of being a campus.
But you also want to be recognizable.
Yes. So we're building an identity, we're giving it a name, but at the same time, we're open to a lot of, anyone basically who wants to contribute to the ecosystem and benefit from the ecosystem. So we moved it into a district, because a district is something that evolves over time and that is open and that is not owned by a single party or person.
What struck me is what your initiatives have in common is that both initiatives are focused on training new talent for the future. Because, of course, the software engineers and the coders and the programmers, those are the people that, now that startups all over the world are expanding so enormously, those are the people we'll really be missing in the future. So is this the secret agenda behind both of these, actually? You were nodding first. So.
Yes, I've been at Google now for 9 years, and a lot of that has been in building talent pipelines around the digital future, and be that on the sales side, on kind of digital marketing, but also now on the tech side, on software engineering and AI and ML. So I think a lot of startups will then bring their talent with them, and I think a lot of those people will then become startups themselves, or start learning. Not all of them, but some of them, and we're helping to facilitate some of that, some of those skills that they need in order to succeed.
So Jen, are you training your personnel of the future or your customers of the future?
A bit of both. I know that's my safety answer. But yes, obviously we'd love for them to use Google Cloud Platform and TensorFlow and all the good stuff. But that doesn't mean we're not going to accept them. We actually want to create a fair platform, and we want to create a thriving ecosystem of startups that are working in tech and actually changing the world for a better. A lot of the startups we work with are trying to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. I picked a few from the Netherlands. We have Connectera, who is looking at using TensorFlow to help farmers be more effective in the methods of specifically dairy farmers. And we also have a startup called Skills Lab, who's helping refugees look at their skill set and analyze their skill set and help them to get jobs. And they've actually just been awarded a Google.org, which is our charity arm. They've been awarded a grant and a place on our AI Impact Challenge Accelerator, which is for nonprofits and startups working towards some of those big challenges. So, yeah, it's a busy job, but
yeah, I'm sure
someone's got to do it.
And at Cumulus Park, Irene, we talked about how banks are changing character. ING is changing, as in the past. Who could have thought that the biggest hotel business in the world would not have a single physical hotel room, AirBNB? So digital technology.
I live next door to them.
Pardon?
I live next door to Airbnb. Oh, fun fact.
So it's very important for businesses that traditionally were not that tech-oriented also to start training people to help with all the digital technology. So the training of new personnel is a big part of the agenda of Cumulus Park, right?
Yeah, so the problem we're facing in the financial industry of our CEO or Ralph Hammers has often said we're becoming a tech company with a banking license. That is not something that is typical in the financial industry. You can say that for a lot of industries happening now at the same time. So basically, you're not just competing with your competitors for talent and for new staff, but you're competing with the rest of the world. And if you look at the numbers, there's simply not enough people graduating in the skills or in the capabilities that we need. And that is also not very likely going to happen in the near future. So we need to be slightly more creative if we don't want to cap our own growth simply by lacking the resources or by lacking the people with the right skills. And there's other ways to look at this problem. So what if we're facing, and I think a lot of industries are facing that same thing, major layoffs in the future. So why would you just kind of break off someone's career who's only 40 or 50 years old and has a lot of years to go, and why not reskill them instead of only hunting recent graduates who you then have to train? So that's an option, reskilling. But the current infrastructure for education is not prepared for that. So maybe we need to team up with a lot of corporate organizations, work together with public organizations to develop these programs. What we also see is that we see a lot of these educational developments that we need to figure out how to get that talent in. Oh yeah, that's what I meant to say. Another option is not to just focus on getting these talents in by giving them a higher salary or an even better contract, trying to compete for sure with Google, who's most likely to win that competition. So maybe it's not about getting everyone on your own payroll. Maybe it's sharing the talent. So sharing economy can also be looked at from a different perspective. If that talent is mainly interested in doing really interesting things, that is not necessarily within one organization. So what if you create a hub where that talent is developing and evolves, and they want to stay there because it's interesting, and all the parties in that ecosystem get access to that talent.
Will all the parties also share the profits?
Yes, well, hopefully. That's the thing. I think what building such an ecosystem requires is to not be afraid to share. And I think a lot of our business models, especially if you work for large organizations, is all about not to share. Minimizing risks, keeping your cards close to your chest. And I think the only way to innovate and to benefit or to somehow solve some of the challenges of the future, it is about sharing, opening up, even if you don't understand the return right away.
So you act a bit like a startup.
Actually, yes, We're actually also going to be, because I saw the ING logo in the picture a minute ago. I think it's really important to understand, yes, ING is one of the initiators and also heavily investing in it because it wants to get it off the ground. However, that ecosystem is only going to succeed if ING is willing to let go. And it is. So we're setting up a standalone foundation and it's going to be open and accessible to all. So that ING logo.
Out the door. Off to the side. Yes. And thereby also stimulating the development of this part of Amsterdam. Because I think that connection between technical, digital innovation and the physical place is one of the things that really makes Cumulus Park special. I understand that this is happening a lot in China, but as far as I know, perhaps in Eindhoven, but as far as I know, the first of its kind in Amsterdam.
Yeah, it's twofold. It's about developing the district. And again, that's not just about ING. That's also about the municipality of Amsterdam that's playing a big role in that, and the Hogeschool and ROC and all the parties around it. Secondly, the ecosystem has two main topics that we focus on. One is digital identity, but the second one is urbanization. So it's not just about the urban development in the direct surroundings, but the ecosystem itself is also busy and working on solving urban challenges. Yeah.
Last question is for you, Irene. You're working with the University of Applied Sciences, the HVA, the Hogeschool van Amsterdam, and the ROC, the Vocational College. But we also have two universities in this city. Why are they not part of this story?
Actually, we are talking to them. And it's just a process. As we just said.
There's a story to this, but she's not telling it.
I know what it's like to work with university programs. It takes a while.
Yes, and also we take a while. So we are a startup, and we worked really hard last year talking to as many people that we could find, large organizations, universities, TNO, but startup founders, well, anyone basically that we could get our hands on to understand what does the city need and what does this ecosystem need. But that also meant that we had to adjust our plans. And we worked with the UvA and the VU also on a master in fintech. But one of the insights was if you want to build a cross-industry ecosystem, it's not about fintech. It's much wider than that. So we needed to reassess our plans. And universities need time and have their own way of taking decisions, et cetera, as well. So we will continue to, I think, work with each other in the future. But it's just about finding another form that is win-win for everyone.
Well, thank you both for these insights into the future of the startup world. Jen Harvey and Irene Duin. Thank you. And now the floor is for our partner, Film Museum. Senior curator Romy Albers has delved into the archives of the museum and has found some extraordinary things for you. I'll say no more for the moment. I'll see if I can find somebody from housekeeping to find us a rag to clean up the podium. Can we ask up there if you can call Laura and ask her? Romy Albers, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Tonight we have two very small items. 1 minute, 1.5 a minute, they last. One is from 1915. It's an American news item. It's about an invention of increasing the efficiency of delivering post and picking up the post by the mail train in small places to make it faster. It's an example of, we have a lot of those films of novelties, inventions, oddities, strange ideas. And these films are more made as a kind of attraction for the public, for the audiences, than it was for the invention itself. I think also a lot of those inventions were just set up for the film, but it's one thing what attracts a lot of people. So it's a very short film, 1915 America. It's a silent film, we put on some sound of it. The second film is a sound film. It's the only Dutch you're going to hear tonight. It's a film from 1932. It's a film from Amsterdam. It's about a small device that has been made for keeping your balance on the bicycle, for being more stable on the bike. It's a very easy device, and you should wonder why it didn't work. So we can show those two films now.
Handbeweging worden een paar extra wieltjes onder het rijwiel geplaatst. De fiets staat dan zo stevig dat omvallen uitgesloten is. Wanneer u plotseling achter een auto moet stoppen, brengt dit apparaat uw veiligheid. Bij het wegrijden heeft u slechts de hendel omhoog te halen en u rijdt weer normaal. Stoppen voor een verkeersstreep is geen bezwaar meer. Even starten en vooruit maar weer. Het fietsen leren aan dames valt heus niet mee. Pas op, rechtuit. Het is geen circus. Door deze nieuwe uitvinding is fietsen voor iedereen mogelijk.
The guy who invented it was Mr. Kensen from Haarlem. He made a patent on it, but it didn't work out. 3 years later, he had a new invention, a double klaxon. So he said, in cases of fog, you should klaxon, and there was a high pitch and a low pitch. If you were going to go left, you had the high pitch. If you're going to go right, you had the low pitch. And if you want to pass a car, you did both. It's logical that it didn't work because there was a lot of noise if everyone uses it in foggy days. So that's maybe an example in first where you can just say a failure is. What's the definition of it? You said in the first time. You can say this is a failure from the beginning. This one is a very good invention. I still think it would be worthwhile thinking about it because it works.
Thank you, Tommy. I must say I was particularly caught by the phrase that this was a great way to teach ladies to ride a bike. Ladies in bike riding, ladies in tech. I guess it's part of our theme of this evening. Oh. May I invite our next speakers to the podium? That is Niels de Greef and Daan Weddepol. Hello. So we're back to the heart of our story this evening, the story of the founders. Niels de Greef, you founded something called Parkfly Rent. What was the idea behind it?
Parkfly Rent was born when I went on vacation and was kind of frustrated by the fact that I had to pay money to park my car, then fly to a different place and pay money again to pick up another car. So I was thinking, like, if Airbnb has successfully enabled this for houses, why has no one done this for cars when you're traveling? So since no one had done it before, I decided to found it. And
so the idea is that while you were away, Parkfly Rent would rent out your car to someone else and bring it back clean. That was an important selling point, right?
Correct. Yeah. And you get part of the earnings and free parking.
Mm-hmm. And how did it go with your startup?
It took just 4 months to get from idea to being in business. We quickly found out that our big competitors were Budget, Avis, Hertz, and Sixt, and they were not particularly happy with what we were doing. So we found ourselves in a bit of a price war with very, very low prices for rental cars at the airports. We were able to grow despite that. We were able to raise some funds, got a venture capitalist on board. We grew through the years, but every single year we did the same round of forecasting where we kind of noticed like the break-even point was farther away. Oh. So you kind of grown to death.
It was disappearing past the horizon.
Yeah.
So when did you, I asked that question also of our previous two founders, when did you start to have that unpleasant gut feeling that things were not going well?
Well, you ignore it a few times, of course. And you start to notice that raising funds becomes harder and you need to get to bigger tickets in order to get to world dominance. We definitely did have that ambition that we needed. But we also found
because your ambition was to have, what was it, 27 offices at 27 different airports across the world?
Yeah. We got to
Think
2
big.
offices.
We like that.
Yeah, we really did notice it was a global market. So there were competitors like Flycar in the US that were raising, at the same time that we were raising like hundreds of thousands of euros, they were raising tens of millions of euros. And so that really quickly turned that market into a market that was, interesting for VCs, but you do need to be the bigger one in that. So at some point we decided that it wasn't going to be us that dominated the market. So we decided to sell to one of our competitors and got to a signed term sheet and everything. But at the actual date of closing, they backed out. So that
sounds familiar.
Yep. So that left us with a very interesting position with very little money on the bank, no real business model that was going to go anywhere. And a lot of investors that were looking at us going like,
where's our money?
What's next?
Were you left with the debts?
No, we actually we closed the business, sold off part of the assets to other companies, and were able to get some of the money back to investors and get everyone to agree that we could close without going bankrupt, which was a lot of effort. We had to get signatures from 193 investors, which is a testament to our investors as well, in the sense that they actually understood what we were doing and understood that they took a risk in investing. So we were able to close relatively scratch-free. But yeah, it's still a dream that went up in ashes, like the picture there.
And, I'll come back to you in a moment. Let's go to Daan Beddepoel of PeerBee. You tell us first, I think probably everybody knows PeerBee, but just tell us, just to be sure.
It's a website where you can borrow things from others nearby.
That is the best elevator pitch ever.
Well, thank you.
But borrow, I thought you also started adding renting to PeerBee.
Yeah, so you can borrow or rent, but I think it's in both versions it's sharing. Yeah.
And when did you start? 2012, if I'm not mistaken?
We launched our first version in the summer of 2012 in the same Rockstart batch that Stefano was in. Yeah.
And what happened then? Did everybody say, wow, this is the best idea ever?
Well, we were met with mixed first feedback. Some people, a lot of people said, oh yeah, that makes so much sense because I have all this stuff in my basement or my
That was
garage.
my reaction too.
Yeah.
Obvious.
But then a lot of business people started thinking about it, and they said nobody wants to share their stuff. You're gonna have to let people, spend a lot of money on it because otherwise people are not gonna get out the door and share their things.
Were they right?
No, they were absolutely wrong.
Oh, good.
No, actually, the supply side, or as we call it, of the platform, so the people with stuff, it's we live in abundance. We live in crazy abundance. I think with just the power drills on our platform, every house in the Netherlands could drill 10,000 holes, like every household. So and people love to share. That's also something we discovered. When people start sharing on our platform, then like 6 months later, 60% of those people are still sharing, still lending their stuff. So that's no problem.
But part of the problem was that people didn't get it in the beginning. It was about the sharing economy, but people weren't. They thought the idea was great, but the reality was hard. Is that right?
Well, what's very challenging, or much more challenging, is the demand side of the platform. So the people that are actually borrowing these things. And there's multiple reasons. One is that we have fully optimized our linear economy, meaning you mine resources, you build new products, you get them to a web shop, they're delivered to your house, and then they go to landfill. We have perfected that. It's super convenient. There's no real ecosystem for circular products, for shared products. Meaning we have to invent everything ourselves. How does this work? How do you get the things to people? And another...
I saw a video that you made that I thought really put it very well. You said, we had an unknown product in an unknown market for an unknown target group with an unknown business model.
That
sounds like
right.
a really good idea.
Yeah, that's exactly what, yeah. So we are figuring all of this out ourselves. Where do you find the people that want to borrow things? How do you compete with companies that get all the money at once? Because if I share a lawnmower, then basically I'm sort of cutting the capacity of that lawnmower in slices, right? Yeah. So I'm basically, you could say you're selling a lawnmower in 10 pieces, but it's in minutes or hours, you know? So every time we sell that slice, or sell or lend, we have to find a new customer. So we have to find 10 customers and spend basically the money of those 10 customers that, let's say, Coolblue or Bol.com only has to spend on one customer.
Okay. And Niels, you were also cutting a car up into slices in this terminology.
Yeah, totally. For us, the main challenge was also getting the operation side right of it, because we were not just a website, we were also a physical operation. Like, people would hand over their cars and we took some partial ownership of it, in the sense that we had to return it in the same condition.
Were all the Maserati owners eager to participate in the scheme, or more the Suzuki Swift owners?
Surprisingly enough, it's not about the value of the car. It's about the what the car means to a person. So you wouldn't get Maseratis, but you would get Teslas. And for some reason, like a Maserati is something you're a petrol head if you have a Maserati. You really love it, and you know it's fast, and you're not eager to share it. A Tesla owner will definitely share. So we got a lot of high value properties, but not a lot of high image properties.
Yeah. And Dan, part of the idea of PeerB was to reduce the production of stuff. Power drills, lawnmowers, all the stuff that you can borrow. That must appeal to an idealistic public, of which I think there is a growing amount.
Absolutely, and I would say that the first people to join our website were people that were doing it out of idealistic reasons. And at first, the platform was free, so there was, people were sharing out of these reasons, not to make money. And back at the day, we sort of thought that was how to do things. Yeah. This is in the early days of, or sort of the Facebook had just announced that they had a business model, but everybody still thought that startups just got investment money, and then you grew big, and then you didn't know how to make money, but that didn't matter. Twitter didn't have a business model, and they were going to the stock market.
Sounds very naive now, doesn't it?
It's very, very. But everybody was doing this. People were investing like this. One of our investors, like the director of one of the funds that invested in us, apparently during the meeting where they decided to invest, said, "Well, Facebook didn't have a business model when they started, so let's do this." So,
Johan, you can react to this in a few minutes.
Yeah. And the other thing is, and I think this is very good marketing from Silicon Valley, but it's also, I think it's created this almost false expectation. All the companies in Silicon Valley that raise all this money say, we want to create a better world. But do they really? Because I think a lot of companies are specifically eager to roll out a very successful business model and then put a little bit of better world sauce on top. And we actually believed this whole better world story, and we thought, well, we can create this better world and maybe put a little bit of business model sauce on top. And so this was sort of the Silicon Valley myth that I kind of fell for. Like, this is possible, we can do this, and it's about creating a better world. And I think I've become a lot less naive about that. I think, yes, you can build a better world through companies, but it means going against a lot of the sort of Darwinian business environment mechanisms that are basically making the most successful companies, or the most successful companies are usually companies that extract a lot of value and not generate a lot of value. Maybe usually it's not fair, but I would say it is a very common theme. If the better you are at extracting value, the better your business model works, the more money you have to acquire more customers and to get into this vicious cycle. Maybe it's possible to build a very successful, globally scaling social enterprise, but I'm still waiting for the first, like, sort of really business model positive example. I think maybe Wikipedia is the closest to that, but they're still dependent on, on
they're still
funding,
asking for our contributions.
Funding. Yeah.
PeerB went from 4 founders to 30 people, and then back to 4 founders.
Yeah.
And now you're 8, right?
I think we're around 8. Yeah.
That must have been a dramatic process.
That was very painful. Yeah.
You had to tell all these people that they were out of a job.
Yeah, I think that was one of the that was the day that I really realized that sort of this eternal growth might not be possible, and that we really needed to think about this and go about this in a different way. And it was the day, that I felt really responsible for the jobs of all these people. It was awful. Yeah.
Both of you have decided to write about about this whole painful process of failure and then of near failure and on your way back up. Niels, you wrote a post-mortem of a startup, and that's where we got that crash and burn image from that we showed just now. It was a very apt image. Why did you decide to write this down? Was it also to help yourself figure out what had gone wrong?
It's
a well-read article.
I wrote it to start just for my own experience, just kind of to write down like what had actually happened, to analyze what could I learn from this and take into the next startup. And it just started, like the first thing I did after I closed it was just go on a long hike. So I went for about 1,000 kilometers of hiking, and you start thinking about things and you start digesting all of the things that you ran into. And I decided to write it down, and when I'd written it down, I figured, it's been a sharing startup. Why wouldn't I share this? Like, we don't share
your learnings.
We don't share the learnings that much.
How have people reacted to it?
I was blown away by the reactions, actually. Like, it's been read like a whole bunch of times. Sprout picked it up, Emers picked it up, RTLZ did an interview based off of it. And I've been, like the next 8 months was just drinking cups of coffee with people that had read the article and just kind of went like, I want to ask your opinion on this.
Would it be fair to say that your failure story was more successful than your startup?
I guess like out of everything, something can be born. So yeah, in the end, it got me talking with the founder of a different sharing startup who offered me a job, which I rejected. And I later did a management buy-in at the same company. So yeah, I'm still working in the sharing economy and loving it.
Has it been difficult for you to go from being a founder to being an employee?
Well, I'm not an employee. I have a management contract and I have shares. So I'm sort of more like a very late co-founder. So they've been going for 4 years and already doing quite a fair bit of revenue.
That's a good middle path, as it were.
Yeah, for me, it was a fairly natural transition from going to Park Flyer, which ended up at about 14 employees. And I joined Camp 2, an RV sharing startup, at about 25 employees, and we're currently over 40. So it was kind of like a natural progression going from startup to scale up and, seeing the different life phases.
Yep. And your postmortem is still on your LinkedIn, for anyone that can read it there. And Dan, you actually wrote your first book.
Yeah.
You got it there?
I brought it.
Okay,
Here
show
it
us. And it's for sale outside afterwards.
I have a limited set with me for people who are curious. Yeah. So I'll translate for those who don't speak Dutch. It's 99 reasons to stop, I guess, or to quit, but to continue anyway. And I think that is, this is my encouragement, I think, to founders, and say there's too many things I think that are that don't make it because they turn out to be hard. And I think when I set off to do this, I didn't realize, or set out to do that, I didn't realize it was going to be so hard. And maybe that's a good thing. But I see a lot of people probably quit early on because they discovered that something's hard. And I think I just want to encourage them and show everybody, actually the journey of a startup is a rough one. It's a roller coaster. It comes with crazy amounts of stress. You feel like you're constantly failing, and it's ups and downs and ups and downs.
Stefano, sounds familiar? That constant anxiety. Yeah.
So,
but Dan, is this really fair? Because we heard from both Michel and from Niels, they were sitting in the notary's office, and the other party just didn't show up. Jesus.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's terrible.
You can't say, oh, you stopped because you found it was hard. That doesn't seem fair.
I'm not saying that Michel, no, I don't think people, I don't want to say it's their fault or their decision, but I do think a lot of early ideas sort of die pretty quickly because we become I think, as Constantijn said, I think as a nation, we're very critical of things that might go wrong. And it's very easy if you want to be right.
We have pre-anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to be right, just tell an early startup founder that he's going to fail. 90% chance you're right. But it's not. It's not really a skill to be able to predict that. I think we should support people that try things and really try to figure out how can we create great businesses? How can we try and improve the world? And and really encourage people to take that risk and to embrace that maybe they'll fail, and to know that there's a lot of failure while you're trying to get there, and maybe that we should accept that as part of the journey. So it's basically, I don't think a startup fails truly until the founder gives up. There's always a way to continue. The question is, should you? And do you still feel motivated enough to continue? But there's always a next step.
I hear a lot of response in the audience. There's always a next step, even if it's only bankruptcy.
Yeah, you could go through bankruptcy and do a restructuring so there's always a next step. The question is, are you still motivated enough? And I think it's important that we pick challenges that, for me at least, that I pick a challenge that I find important enough to really dedicate myself to.
Yeah, you write about that quite honestly in the book. You ask yourself, is this really? Do I really care enough to keep going with this extremely difficult process and to spend all my working hours and more on trying to make this happen? Yeah. On the Niels?
I guess I would like to add something to that. Whether or not your startup fails is not the same as you failing as a founder. Like, there is so much to be learned by starting a startup. And there's so many things you will never learn in corporate life. There are so many risks taking that actually pay off, even though they might not pay off monetarily. And it's just, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I've started up 3 startups. I've learned something from every single one of them. They've always forced me well outside of my comfort zone, doing things like learning how to code, which I really didn't want to do, but I needed to do it. And afterwards, you kind of go like, yeah, that did change my perspective on it. I did understand my own business better. I understood other people that were doing that work better. And it taught me something.
So you don't regret it?
No, definitely not. No. Do it again in a heartbeat. Not the same one, though.
Okay. Thank you both very much for your open-heartedness and for your sharing.
Thank you.
The final round of the evening. I would like to invite Prince Constantijn back to the stage. You can take the big chair, together with Bas Beekman, the director of Startup Amsterdam, Johan van Mil of Peak Capital, and Meerte van der Erve. Do I have your name? Where is Meerte? Oh, here you are. Okay. Who is the COO of The Next Web. May I invite all of you to the stage, please? Yes, everybody has a mic? Yeah.
3 mics. Lady in the middle.
Lady in the middle. Here you are.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I wanted to start with Bas Beekman, the director of Startup Amsterdam. Since the main focus of Stadsleven is city life, urban issues, I wanted to ask you to give us an idea of what startups mean for Amsterdam in talent, in income, and in image. That's also very important.
Yeah.
Are you checking your email?
No, because you asked me for the numbers, right?
If you have some numbers to crunch, that's good.
I have some numbers. And I mean, it's really hard to have numbers on, let's say, ecosystems, startups ecosystems, because like the CBS and the Chamber of Commerce, they don't really have them. So we work together with a data provider. It's called Dealroom. It's a startup from Amsterdam, and they measure ecosystems around the world. So they have a lot of information. And to give you some numbers about Amsterdam. So we have around, let me see, 1,200 startups in the city. 150 of them are scale-ups, so they have more than 50 people. 315 foreign tech companies like Tesla, Netflix. They all have their headquarters in Amsterdam. So around 1,700 tech companies.
Are they here
in
for
total.
for the startup culture or for another reason?
We can discuss this later. It's so.
That's for downstairs with a beer. Okay.
Okay. 80% of the tech companies are younger than 10 years. It's good to know. And they provide us, the city, with 70,000 jobs. So 70, which is 13% of the total job market. I mean, this is something which I think is a lot. And especially the last 2 years, 13,000 new jobs were added. 13,000. So 1-3. I mean, and this is, of course, the job growth engine of Amsterdam right now.
Is this the most important job growth engine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are not going to work for corporates anymore. They want to work for startups or scale-ups. So companies younger than 5 years add the most jobs. And
but Bas, what about this? Before you continue, let me interrupt you to ask about this story in the Atlantic that I quoted in the bit on the web magazine, that millennials are not able or not willing to take this risk anymore, and that at least in the U.S. apparently, the number of millennials starting a startup is really down.
So I think the number of startups is maybe getting a bit down now. The number. It doesn't mean that millennials don't want to take the risk to work for a startup. Founding a startup, I think, is something else. If you look at the fastest growing companies of Amsterdam, they all need young talent, and they try to attract this young talent. Companies like Adyen, like Booking, like TomTom, like Elastic, they're all mentioned here. They're all searching for young talent. But they're not corporates. They have another environment to work for. So a lot of them will work for these companies. That's the reason why Netflix or Tesla also are based their European headquarters in Amsterdam, because they think they still find the right people. And,
are those Dutch people who are coming to work for them, or are they also
partly
people
Dutch.
Coming from other countries to live in Amsterdam because there's an interesting job to be had here?
Yeah, it's both. Yeah.
You told me that for the first time you had heard that the housing market might be a threat to the introduction of new talent into the startup world, because people are starting to say, when you were both in Helsinki at Slush, people are starting to say to you, well, Amsterdam's really hot, but I can't find a place to live. Can I go there?
Yeah.
Is that true?
This is happening at the moment, yeah. I mean, this is happening in a lot of European cities, of course, but also in Amsterdam.
Yeah, we've actually lost some people because they couldn't find a place to live in Amsterdam, and they wanted to live in the city, so yeah.
You've actually lost people who were already here and left again.
Yeah, already here, and they couldn't find a place to stay or a place to live, and then they decided to move back to, well, in this case it was Budapest, because that's where they were from, and they had a home there, a house there. Yeah, so it does happen. Yeah.
Did you have any more fun facts for us?
Yeah, also because there is an investor on the couch. So until now, this year, 411 million euro is raised in Amsterdam in around 122 rounds. And more than 60 companies raised over $1 million. And that is an increase of 20% than if you compare this to last year. So 60 companies raised over €1 million. I mean, I think that's a lot, but I'm not a specialist. What do you think, Johan?
I think that's right. Yeah. I think it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. Hearing the numbers also of the companies here and starting.
Well, Amsterdam is, if you look at the total volume, it's only 13th city in Europe, but it's, I think, 5th in a number of deals. So the deals, on average, are smaller in the Netherlands or in Amsterdam. So typically you see that there are more startups in Amsterdam than in Stockholm, about twice as many startups, but in Stockholm there's twice as much money. So
Why is that?
That's what allows them to grow faster.
Do either of you have any idea why that is?
Yeah, I think the reason for that is that the ecosystem is more mature. What you see, a lot of companies, of course, have been started in Sweden. Take for example the Spotify's and different companies, and they bring along other talent. So then the management also starts companies, and they also start investing. The previous investors, but also the founding team, starts also investing in other companies, and it creates a whole different exponential growth. And if you compare it, for example, to Oslo, to Norway, which is next to Sweden, there's a whole different system because there's a very stable and big oil industry.
Did we have the first statistic that Johan brought with him? That's about the place of the Netherlands in this whole unicorn landscape.
Yeah. So I think if you have successes like we have in the Netherlands currently, as the company we just mentioned, it brings along a lot of new companies which are being started by founders, but also with the employees who worked with at the company.
To get back to the Atomico report that was presented last week, the State of European Tech, they had one amazing statistic about investment that I wanted to put to you, Johan. Investment in Europe is growing really fast. In 2013, it was 5 billion. 2015, 10 billion. 2018, 23 billion. And as I said in my introduction, they expect to reach 35 billion this year. But at the same time, I read an article in Wired of last year where they said there's too much money around. There's so much money looking for a place to land that it's artificially pushing up the valuation of these startups and making the whole system really unstable. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, it is. I think there's a lot of money in the market, and I agree with what Constantijn just mentioned. From a founder perspective, I think there's always too little money in the market, and from an investor perspective, I mean, we provide companies with our money, there's too much. But I think, looking at the low interest which is there, which I think if you look at the funds which have been raised last years, also in the Netherlands, but also in countries around us, I think there's a lot of money there. I think there's a lot of startups also, but I also see that valuations are rising and rising. And
which is not, I mean, it sounds like a good thing at first sight, but
no, I don't
not
think
really.
No, I don't think it's very good because I think one of the hardest challenges a startup currently has is to find talent. And when there's a lot of companies which are not very healthy, and they also hire people and retain people and pay them big salaries, and it's very hard for other companies to find the right talent. So I think what would be very good for the economic right now is to have a pretty good crash, and that a lot of unhealthy companies start losing people, and then a lot of companies which are doing way more better can be way more successful.
What would TechLeap say to that?
Well, actually, we know when companies start going down. We work with Dealroom. We have our own startup finder. We actually can see that activity of companies going down. And I had this idea that we could sell that to a kind of sourcing company like Randstad or everything, because basically when a company is going to go into problems, and you can start picking away the talent. But it's not very nice to you guys. But actually, that you could actually do that, and it's
this really sounds like the rapacious American winner-takes-all model.
No, I mean, but it's I think there are two different things. So one is good for the system, and one is better for the companies. In Silicon Valley, they have something which is horrible for the companies, but very good for the system. Is that people there's no compete clauses. So basically, your talent walks out of the door with all of your knowledge every 18 months. So and that's really bad for your company, but it's really good for the system because that knowledge starts to circulate, and many new businesses grow out of that. But it's not nice for your company.
No, if you had your druthers, as we say in the U.S., I would rather this or that. Which of those two would you prefer? Which is less detrimental?
I don't know. I mean, I think you hear a lot of companies that also have a presence in the US keep their developers here because they're much more loyal. You even hear that from companies that are outside of Amsterdam, that they're more loyal than the employees in Amsterdam. So and in the US the same thing. People in Seattle used to be venture capital would say you have to come to Silicon Valley. Now they say keep your people there because it's too expensive here in terms of house price, living, everything. and your talent is going to walk out the door every 18 months with a bag of options, and they're basically building. They're like little VC. I mean, they're building little portfolios of companies, and that's not happening here. So that loyalty is also important. So I guess there's something to say for both of these things.
Mirta, you organize the Next Web every year, which is an amazing event. I think last time I was there, not last year, but the year before, there were 20,000 people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this year there was.
And this year?
Actually, this year they're going to be 20,000, or that's what we're aiming at. And last year there were 15,000. So yes, huge amount of delegates who've joined us.
So it's a sharing of knowledge, but it's also a job market.
Yes, indeed, and exactly. Yeah, the job market part of it is that is what we're actually developing further, and also to see if we can not only bring it to the conference, but also bring it to our co-working spaces and also to other events that we do throughout the year. So, yeah, I would say one of the growth areas for TNW, and also I would say the ecosystem benefits from, is really to develop more products in the talent area. So, and services, of course, yeah.
And do you see the talent crunch that both Irene and Jen and many of the speakers this evening talked about?
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's what we recognize, and that's why we always we also believe that we can help in that, because that's also one of the roles that we play as a partner in the ecosystem, is to make sure that we can help to solve these problems, at least for a part of it.
But how? Because a lot of people say that the Dutch educational system is just not up to par in this field. Children don't learn to code at school, for example.
Yeah. So there's a lot of steps probably that we will take, and probably working together, like of course it was said before, with universities, or at least trying to work together with universities, is of course a good step, and also working together with corporates, working together with governments, together to try and make that happen. And a lot of things probably have to do as well with changing our culture, changing the way that we bring up our kids to kind of, educate them, or at least bring them up with the idea of other forms of education and not only the typical doctor or whatever.
Yeah. Codom, could you tell us something about Codom?
No, it's also about tapping in new groups, groups of talent. I mean, if you look at, let's say, the climate or the startup ecosystem right now in Amsterdam, it's mainly dominated by white male. And also the 4 founders we just heard, they are guys in their 30s, starting businesses, working for tech companies now. And I think there is a lot of...
I dare to think they're all white. Mm-hmm.
So I think there are like there's a lack of women entrepreneurs, for example. I mean, this is a big problem everywhere, but also in Amsterdam. There's a lack of people with a minority or an ethnic background, and so I think these are new groups we have to tap in now, and you see this happening right now. So you mentioned Codam, which is a coding school founded by the founder or co-founder of TomTom, Corine Fricreux. And she came up with a new school for people with that dropped off from their school. They didn't finish school, to give them a new opportunity to learn coding, which is a very successful concept from France, actually from Paris. But it works here in Amsterdam as well. So there are a lot of... I mean, this is a market now, because there is a lack of talent. It's getting a market. It's not only the knowledge institutes that are working on this anymore, like the UvA and the VU, but it is all kind of private coding schools, growth hacking schools, developing schools, you name it, and there is a school for it. So there is a lot of things happening now.
Yeah. And,
but the question is it enough? I mean,
yeah. Constantijn?
Yeah, and together with Johan, we started Fundright. So basically look at the whole chain. So it's the talent development, it's how many women actually found a business, and then or are in founding teams, and then how do they get funding. And it's also about raising awareness, because you mentioned it now, the mostly male and white tech environment. I think if you look at the demography, if you go more to Eindhoven, it's more engineering, it becomes whiter and becomes more male and becomes older. And so every kind of sector has its own demography. But we have to be aware of that. And once you're aware, once you start seeing it, and we start seeing the implicit biases, then you can start address them. And I think well, when we started this, we were 10 venture capitalists that joined, and now there are about 40. And it's growing, and it's really something that the industry is supporting, because I think most people believe that this is the right thing to do. Not only because it's fair, but it's also because there's this huge pool of talent that's not plugged into.
Good business.
Yeah, and they also develop different kinds of businesses, because it's the half of the consumer population, and they have different needs than men have, and we can't just have men producing for men and then letting women take participate in those businesses. So there's also
we could ride bicycles too.
Yeah, right. But you'd have a different kind of bicycle, maybe, And if you
with wheels,
with wheels,
with
bicycle wheels.
wheels.
That idea actually worked.
That was innovation. Let me tell you, that was really innovation. Johan, Peak Capital is also part of Fundrite, as Constantijn said. There's also now a new fund. There was also a fund already called The Next Women, and there's a new fund called Borski.
Yeah.
After the 18th century investor Johanna Borski, whom I had never heard of, with 21 million from ING, Rabobank, ABN AMRO, and Van Lanschot. So this makes me think that indeed it's starting to make business sense to have a more diverse startup population.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, it shows from research that female founder teams, especially also with one female founder or a complete female founder team, is way more successful. So I think it's very logical that the next phase also in funding and also in VCs is funds specifically aiming at investing in female founders. And I think it's a very good development. And I think you will see also different funds also investing in, for example, founders which are older and which have another, as mentioned also, another background. So I think you will have a broader view also in other funds. I think it's very good what's happened, because there we as an ecosystem is really needed to help this going. And in just general funding, there's enough. I think there's enough money, but in terms of where there's a lot of research being needed, as Constantijn mentioned, and with female founders, I think it's very good that extra money is put on the table to get it going. Yeah.
You could see it as positive discrimination, but we need it. Mirte?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, well, as a woman in the panel, I would think I'd like to comment on the female founders, which is, of course, it's great that there's an investment and there's a lot of funding going towards that, and we have to, I think, together make things happen. But also, it's also, once again, it's a cultural thing that especially in the Netherlands, we see that. Well, I see that working full time as a mother of two smaller children. I have a lot of friends who tell me or ask me again and again, so do you really work full time? And I'm the only one of my friends actually who does that. So
the only one?
Yes, of my friends who are mothers, and most of them work 4 days or 3 days, and they think it's enough, which is great. It's their choice, but I'm doing something different from the rest, and that is really standing out. So really, in the Netherlands, we're so different than, for example, Belgium or France or another country.
We have the highest percentage of women working part-time of all of Europe,
yeah,
right?
I think 75% of women are working part-time, whilst in Belgium or in Germany, I think it's just below 50. So, yeah, I think changing the awareness.
Can you work part-time as the founder of a startup?
I don't know. I'm not the founder of a startup, but I don't know. I think you probably are also always working, and you're probably always working, even if you're a mother with 2 or 3 children. Just yeah.
To finish off, I'd like to look at a dilemma that I found in 2 of the other statistics that you sent us, Johan. Could we see those? You can also look at the monitor here. Okay. This is startups by year that became unicorns. I mean, that's a nice, healthy, rising line. But you also sent us this statistic. That seems to contradict each other, because everywhere in the US and in Europe, the number of startups has been dropping since 2015. I can't make sense out of these 2 statistics. What am I missing?
That's a good question. It was also the thinking that we had when we were sharing these things. No, it shows from a lot of graphs that the number of startups is declining. We saw it also in other research. So I think, starting a company, and I think we heard that today, it looks pretty easy. But, I mean, I've done it myself a few times. It's pretty hard to launch a company and to go through that and grow through that. And I think a lot of companies are being born and also are hiring people. So I think a lot of founders also realize that you can start a startup. That's one, but you can also work at a startup and start your startup after it. So I think a lot of talent pool is also going there. It's my feeling. I think that's one. But the second thing is also, I think, in the market.
Repeat offenders.
Repeat offenders, yeah. That's a nice name. But I think this second thing is also happening, that there's a lot of insecurity, economically in the world right now. And I think it's also preventing a lot of people to start their own company. I think there's also underlying that.
So fewer startups, more money. That goes back to what you said about maybe certainly in the Netherlands also fewer companies, but more money being circulating above the market, looking for a place to land. You yourself have gone international recently with Peak Capital. Yeah. What
Correct.
And how and why?
A good question. What? We raised a new fund, a 66 million euro fund with which we're going to invest internationally. So we started in the Netherlands only and now doing also Belgium, Germany and the Nordics. And that also, opens up our horizon. So we're going to invest internationally, also seeking other companies and other markets. And we learn every day that, as we also did as founders and as we also learn with the companies where we invest in, that internationalizing is really a hard job. So I'm spending a lot of my time on it. So I think that's one. I think you see a big difference per country. So I think you see, for example, in valuations that markets like Sweden, but also markets like Germany, that the valuations are way higher than we see, for example, in the Netherlands. So I think that's. And the third thing we learned is that I think if you have a startup in the Netherlands, you have a very good position because it's pretty easy to have a company here, to start a company. I think it's still, if you compare to these cities, especially in this case Stockholm and Berlin, it's pretty cheap to live here. It's not cheap, but it's not as expensive as, for example, London or Paris or San Francisco is. And I think we are by nation. I think that's the beauty of the Netherlands. When you start a company here, we have to go international. And if you have a company, based, for example, from Berlin, in Germany, you can stay local. So all the companies that we see starting here are opened up and are started really to become international. And I think it is a big advantage here.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a very good thing. Yeah.
I'm curious to hear from the audience as our last speaker of the evening. Having heard this, we heard a lot about the hard parts of startup life, about bankruptcy, debt, disappointment. We also heard the excitement and the advantages, and that if all goes well, there's a lot of money to be learned. By a show of hands, who is leaving this evening feeling discouraged?
No one.
Yeah, there's one
At least there's one.
Who is leaving feeling encouraged? Well, that's a good thing. I think we did a good thing this evening.
The rest is nothing?
And the rest is just here to learn.
Thinking.
May I thank all of you, the members of our panel, Prins Constantijn, Bas, Meerte, and Johan, our other speakers, and of course I for its always wonderful contribution. And thank all of you for joining us this evening, and join us downstairs for a beer.